It's time for Bombastic Plastic.
Bombastic.
This week, we're going to dissect Hallows Eve's 2006 box set, The History of Terror. We'll start off with the first album, Tales of Terror, the first disc of the set. Now, the wheels of production were really starting to turn in Metal Blade in '85 when these Georgia boys made their Metal Massacre debut. They made it onto Metal Massacre 6 on the strength of a cassette demo that they had shipped to Brian Slagle. Subsequently, they were signed to a 2-record deal, and they released the horror-themed speed metal full-length Tales of Terror a few months later. There was an air of intrigue as the band seemed so heavy and sinister with that dark picture on the back cover, and I think the guitarist Skeletor had like an eye missing. He wore an eye patch, and he needed it. I want to say that's true. Anyway, come at me in the DMs. Anyway, the album has not lost its campy charm over the years, and it's hard to believe that it came out on the same day as the band's first show. You can't say that about many bands.
I'm sure it wasn't easy to find a group of scummy longhairs willing to play tight, thrashy metal in the Southeast in the early 80s. Lots of rejects wanting to saw on Aerosmith and Foghat covers. Ironically, their first demo was produced by Foghat bassist Nick Jameson. Instead of shaking their crusty manes to this racket, 2 drummers are listed for the sessions. But in all fairness, the execution is spot on. Heavy on Kill 'Em All and Show No Mercy trace elements, particularly in the scorching opener, plunging to Megadeth, and the gloriously performed Metal Merchants. The rest of the album floats their ghost story accounts over galloping 2-guitar maiden homage, There Are No Rules, The Mansion. Stacey Anderson does his best to straddle the line between glass-shattering power metal histrionics and barking speed metal. Clearly, these guys were onto something special, both lyrically and vocally, particularly as we make our way to the finale, Hallows Eve.
The bonus tracks from this era include a scorching speedball version of Evil Offerings at CBGB's. The crowd response isn't really audible, but Tommy's bass and vocals sound great in The Mansion, especially considering the time and the genre, and that it's a bootleg. So this song reminds me of my poor dog, who is 14 years old and likes to fall down the stairs. I didn't really understand the title of it until now, but thanks to Jax, I now understand the title, Plunging to Megadeth. Okay, moving on to the next Hallows Eve album of the set, Death and Insanity.
Death and Insanity from 1986. All the stars aligned for this one. Hallows Eve, upping the heaviness quotient, keeping the registers low on both riffs and voice, much like Metallica, learning to tone down the vocal cheese on the second album. Every Hallows Eve album seems to have a different drummer, but this particular skin basher, Tim Helton, yes, that's Tim with a Y, seems the right fit for the band. That snare tone just perfect for the groove in Goblet of Gore, and the simplistic smash till death blaster, Suicide.
Lyrics are even darker this time, as evidenced in the boneheaded DIE Death in Effect, but those grinding guitars and that thumping bass drum is so fucking sweet you won't mind it a bit. And David Stewart's little classical guitar piece, Obituary, is surprisingly tasteful and melodic. Was there more to this band than meets the eye? It seems so. I got to see him at the age of 15 at my local teen center with Cryptic Slaughter, so I thought they were gods at this point. Up until then, the most exciting thing about that place was a broken air hockey table. So let's play a song from Death and Insanity.
This is Lethal Tendency.
Lies reality. Time out of mind. God is withering. Leaving right behind. Lethal tendency.
Okay, let's move on to the third album, Monument from '88. Another album, another drummer for Hallows Eve. It's 1988 at this point, and while many bands playing the style have become Metallica copycats or they've jumped on the techno thrash bandwagon, the Georgia Boys stay pretty close to the winning formula that made Death and Insanity such a great record.
Strange album cover, but they were going for that horror camp vibe, so it makes a little more sense now. Opener Speed Freak is like unwashed Neanderthals bashing on instruments, and easily my favorite Hallows Eve song. The primitive lyrics are like their calling card at this point, and I must say, the genius of verses like crashing through the barriers like loaded missile carriers. I'm fully on board now.
That is pure poetry right there.
The Queen cover is appalling, of course. Stacy's low end register sounds ridiculous, and it's all hey, hey, heys. We'll just pretend that one never happened.
Right. This was the era, we all know at this point, the thrash bands were somehow required to do the cover version thing, with Testament doing the Aerosmith song to Dark Angel doing that horrible version of Immigrant Song. But I would have suggested an Alice Cooper cover make the album if we had to, like Desperado. That would help with the horror theme. They had already covered I'm 18 at some point prior to this. At any rate, the quality continues with the rest of the disc. Simplistic crunching metal like Rot Gut, Painkiller, and No Sanctuary are all well executed. Drummer this time is Rob Clayton, bashing and thrashing away, completely unaware that he would spontaneously combust after this album like all their other drummers. One of the strongest albums in Hallows history, and the sound of a band that are not trying too hard and they're not changing too radically or looking to sound with it at this point in their career. They had completed a 2-album deal with Metal Blade. This is interesting. And Monument was to be the first of a new 8-album deal.
Wow.
You think Brian Slagel was impressed? I think so, right? But according to Tommy, here's what killed Hallows Eve. The band was in Brooklyn on tour, and the singer, Stacey Anderson, just got in a cab and left. And they never came back. Now, Tommy tried to restart the band multiple times. He even got together with Rhett Forrester from Riot in the early 90s, and they were going to do a rehearsal together for Hallows Eve. But Forrester was sadly shot and murdered a few days after that. So it wasn't to be.
In terms of the disc's bonus DVD, the material is surprisingly strong and the band tight and powerful. According to Stewart, the tours were extensive in the early days. The band would be booked for 3 to 6 weeks at a time for gigs all over the U.S. The show in the DVD from the 1988 Poughkeepsie is probably the best. The vocals are a little drowned out at the start, but the mix improves as the show goes on. Hair flying around and songs like Speed Freak and No Sanctuary, full of speed and power. The drummer at this point was Tom Knight, who later became the drummer for TLC.
He wasn't no scrub.
The main legs of the 88 tour included dates with Fates Warning, MX Machine, At War, and Blind Illusion, who morphed into Primus at some point during the tour.
In my email correspondences with Tommy, he said that when they were touring with Primus, they had to really get to know Primus's set list, because if they didn't like kind of jump in, they would just jam for hours. Like they had no concept of time. Very interesting. Yeah. A lot of this feature came from Tommy Stewart's emails, which thank you very much for this information, Tommy. Appreciate it. The show from 86 in Middletown, New York is good, but there's only one view and it's like from the side of the stage. So the crowd is invisible. You don't know how many people they're playing to. But according to Stewart, he said the stuff that's included in the box set was simply shot by fans. So he's really not sure what the plan was or why it turned out the way it did. He said that as far as the audience in the Grunge Club is concerned, there were about 50 people there, and that may be all that could have fit in the venue. He said that every band at the time was playing at the Grunge Club, and it was awesome that the thrash scene was literally being invented right before their eyes. One night, we might play with COC in Middletown, New York, and the next we would play for 300 people with Slayer at Lemoore in Brooklyn. It was an amazing time, and we were part of something magical that was growing until Stacy left. So,
Not me.
anyway, this is Speed Freak.
Driving like a maniac, capable of apologize. All you need is what I am, I don't really give a damn. I believe a tendency, like no other human being.
This is the Snaggletooth Extreme Metal Podcast.